Chapter 3. 'Tis better to travel hopefully. 9:30 a.m. Thursday 13th of August 1970. Glasgow Central Station, Gordon Street, Glasgow. Next day me and Leanna meet up at Central Station, all excited, and we're off to London. Thomas Cook have booked us into a nice quiet bed and breakfast place in Bayswater. We'll have dinner in a good restaurant and see a play. I fancy The Mousetrap. It's been running for years and years, so it must be prime. And I do like a bit of a mystery. We'll be going down to Southampton the following morning by the boat train, and then the ferry to Le Havre, and lunch, the famous French cooking. And then on to Paris. 7 nights in a nice pension, that's the French word for a small hotel, and then we travel overland to Istanbul, on the train, which will be a big adventure in itself. We've booked a 2-berth compartment, second class. The train staff change it into a sitting room during the day. It all sounds very exciting. I did wonder if I should splurge on first class for us, but it was awfully dear. And in Thomas Cook's they showed us a diagram, so we could see that our little compartment would be absolutely private. And going by the pictures, it looked pretty luxurious too. I did book first class to London, though, remembering what it was like the last time I went down to England, crammed in with 7 other people in a tiny second-class carriage. As we're getting onto the train, Leanna says she's sure she caught a glimpse of Charlie Stout. I tell her severely not to let her nerves run away with her. We have a lovely lunch in the first-class dining carriage, and when we go to our seats after lunch, by pure luck we have a compartment all to ourselves. There might have been another 4 people in there, but there aren't. By the time we've settled in at our B&B place in Bayswater, we're in a bit of a rush to get to the theatre. But luckily they do a knife and fork tea where we're staying, so that's all right. It turns out to be rather an adventure just getting to the Ambassador's Theatre. The Tube, London's subway system, is difficult to make sense of because London has lots and lots of underground train lines, all different, not like in Glasgow where we have just the one subway train track going around in a giant circle. We get to the theatre in good time, only the box office say there are no stalls seats available. That's a surprise. We'd thought that there would be plenty of seats on a Thursday night. It's the day before payday, after all. They offer us balcony seats instead. That upsets Leanna, she's afraid of heights. She doesn't want to go up to the balcony seats. I managed to persuade her, but she's shuddering by the time we take our seats in the front row. And then, if you please, she says Charlie Stout is sitting in the middle of the stalls, next to a stout grey-haired woman in a yellow dress. Where? I lean forward just as the lights go out and the curtain goes up. We both enjoyed the play very much. Agatha Christie is a very clever writer. And the beds at our B&B are comfy. Next morning they give us a good cooked breakfast. They say it's an Irish breakfast. I don't quite like to ask what the difference is between an Irish breakfast and an English breakfast, because I'm not all that keen on Irish jokes, and you never know, the answer may be a joke. Across town in Whitehall, Major Ellis Peveril is enjoying an English breakfast which no one in government would dream of comparing to an Irish breakfast, although the difference is in fact very slight. An Irish breakfast is an English breakfast: bacon, eggs, sausages, tomatoes, a fried slice of bread, fried potatoes, and mushrooms, eaten with toast and marmalade, all except for the toast, instead of which there's soda bread, or wheaten bread, and fried potato scones instead of the fried slice. Mari needn't have worried, there was no Irish joke. The Major doesn't consider anything connected with the Irish to be a joke. As the highest-ranking English official in the new International Anti-Terrorist Initiative ATJF, Anti-Terrorist Joint Forces, he regards the IRA as a dangerous criminal nuisance and otherwise never thinks of the Irish at all. What Major Peveril thinks about night and day is getting Britain's ATJF accord with France and Italy running like clockwork. So in an effort to fortify the accord by renewing his bonds with the leaders of the wartime French resistance, almost all of whom are now highly placed in French governmental circles, the Major is travelling to Paris today. Glancing at his watch, Ellis abandons his breakfast half-eaten. There is barely enough time to comb his moustache, and change out of his Savile Row suit into dress uniform before the ministry chauffeur arrives to drive him to the boat train. Harry Brown is the only one who is enjoying his breakfast to the full without any qualms about jokes or any thoughts of stern duty. Mr. Brown is not in the habit of allowing intellectual activity of any kind to interfere with his enjoyment of his food, but this morning he needs to take in hand that stupid Irish git, Fergal Riley. Not until he has finished his double SOSs with extra slice, though. Mopping up the last runnel of egg yolk with a corner of toast, Harry pushes his plate aside, lights a Benson and Hedges, and takes a gulp of the brick orange liquid that the lorry drivers who breakfast here call tea. There's an excellent view of the Le Havre dock and the Channel water beyond through the cafe's plate glass window, which is why Harry chose this eatery as Fergal's lookout spot. Settling back comfortably, for there is no knowing how long this conversation may go on, he checks once more that Fergal's chair is facing the window squarely, and begins. "You don't know Magat?" "Ah, I do so, boss. The numbskull prattles I met her at London airport a couple of weeks ago, do you not mind that?" Restraining with little difficulty an impulse to silence Fergal with a punch, a true leader is always calm, Harry asks calmly, "Fergal, what did I tell you about contradicting me?" "Sorry, boss. You're not likely to get near enough Magat to speak to her, but if you do, you don't." Fergal opens his mouth, but catching sight of the boss's glittering eye, closes it again. "Who do you speak to, Fergal?" "The woman whose luggage Magat points out." "She won't point out the luggage, Fergal, she'll point out the woman." "Yes, but how can she point anything out to me if I'm not to go near her?" "We talked about this, Fergal. When the ferry is coming in, you'll be watching through the window here." "Yes, boss." "And you'll see Magat talking to a woman." "Yes, boss." "The woman she talks to is the one you're to get into conversation with on the train." "What if she talks to more than one woman?" "She won't." "She might." This is why Harry Brown had decided to begin rehearsing Fergal so early in the day, hours before he needs to go into action. "Fergal, what did I tell you about contradicting me?" "Sorry, boss." "Me and Leanna splurge on a taxi to take us to the boat train, where we're booked into first class, and on the way down to Southampton Leanna doesn't see any phantom Charlie Stouts. We're both pretty excited boarding the ferry. Now we're really on our way to Paris, because the ferry journey is partly in France, well, on French water. The boundary line between England and France is halfway across the English Channel. As we're going down the stairs, or gangway, or whatever they call it, on our way towards the refreshment saloon, suddenly Leanna sees Charlie Stout again. She claims he's at the bar, by himself. I look. There's no one at the bar. I point that out to Leanna. I tell her she's getting to be obsessed with Charlie Stout, but she just gets that mulish look she sometimes gets, so we go back up onto the deck. It's nice on deck. There's a lovely breeze, and the view of the sea is lovely too. The travelers' luggage is all piled up on deck, so I go and perch on the bigger of my two suitcases and it makes quite a good seat. Leanna perches beside me, on my other suitcase. Leanna has far fancier luggage than me, a matched set. A smart little traveling case and 3 bigger suitcases, all in nice graduated sizes, very posh. My suitcases are all scuffed up. After a bit I go down to the saloon to bring us up cups of tea. The travel people said it would be the last chance for a decent cup of tea until we're in our own quarters in Istanbul and we can brew it ourselves. So we perch there on my suitcases sipping our tea and we're having just the grandest time. As the shoreline grows closer, people begin trickling up onto the deck from the refreshment saloon. I see a tall dark woman bundled up in a windbreaker admiring Leanna's luggage set. People are always admiring Leanna's clothes and things, she has such excellent taste. The woman comes over to Leanna and me and we all fall into conversation. She's got a strong accent, I can't quite place it, it doesn't sound French. But when I ask her if she'll be traveling to Paris on the train like us, she says that she won't be traveling on because she lives in Le Havre. Then she says what a beautiful day it is, with the breeze just right. Leanna and me are dead chuffed that we've got such perfect weather. Most people are clustering near the gangway off the boat now. A bit silly really, where's the rush? The three of us chat for another few minutes. Then the woman drifts off and Liana and I have that side of the deck all to ourselves again, which is nice. French cooking certainly lives up to its reputation. Our lunch at Le Havre was incredible. After 3 helpings of chocolate mousse I'm so full that I'm waddling. As I glance down at my tummy, wondering if maybe from being so full of mousse it's grown a little bit bigger, Liana grabs my arm. "Quick, Mari, look now." She squeaks out. I look up quickly, but I can't see anything out of the ordinary, only a lot of people milling about, which is what you'd expect because we're heading for our train to Paris. What? Her nails are biting into my arm. Really, Liana has been in a very funny mood ever since we started our journey. She looks down into my face. Liana is about 4 inches taller than me, and whatever she sees there she doesn't seem to like, for she glances up and out, and as she does, her nails bite even deeper into my arm. It's too late. All the sorrow in the world weighs down her voice. He's gone now. I don't ask who he is, because I'm afraid that the answer will be Charlie Stout. We've reached our train and climb up aboard. The train isn't too packed, and after that marvelous lunch I'm feeling mellow, so I'm quite happy just to sit in the rail carriage, half reading, half dozing. But habit is strong, and by 4:30 I want my tea. I ask Liana whether we'd rather take the risk of paying for tea that turns out to be undrinkable, or do without our tea altogether. In the end, we go into the dining carriage for afternoon tea, because the French don't do a proper knife and fork tea. But Liana's broad-minded and so am I. We have no objection to eating cream cakes at tea time. Coming into the dining carriage, we pass a table where an elderly English military man sits alone, glancing through a small leather notebook, a cane resting slantwise on his tabletop. His tea has not yet been served. I'm surprised to see he's in uniform. He looks as if he's past compulsory retirement age, an ancient relic. Liana spots a woman who lives near her, Aileen Macpherson, so we join her at her table. Aileen is travelling with Senga McAuliffe, a friend of hers whom we don't know because she lives in the Highlands. With them is an exquisite little lady, very chic, with laughing black eyes, who introduces herself as Valerie Garnier, tour guide for their package holiday, which turns out to be the selfsame package that we're on. What luck! Now we can get the lowdown on Paris whilst eating cream cakes. An excellent combination. As we're all saying hello, we're joined by someone Valerie knows, Fergal Riley. Despite his name, Fergal lives and works in Paris. He's an art dealer, and for sure that man has kissed a Blarney Stone. Oh, the black Irish good looks of him. And does the man know it? Full of himself, he is. Fergal tells us that he does quite well for himself by importing paintings from Scotland, Ireland, and occasionally the Bayswater Road in London, where it seems that despite all the splashed paint on black velvet artworks, now and then a true artist is driven to exhibit on the park railings by the need to put food on the table. Whilst Fergal is holding forth, I glance around the dining carriage. 2 men seated alone together at a table quite near us are holding hands. That's sweet, and it's all thanks to our recent Prime Minister, Harold Wilson. Of course he wasn't the Prime Minister at the time, for it was his reforms that meant British men can now hold hands in public without fear of being banged up in the pokey, and these 2 are British, I feel sure. One looks Welsh, and there's something about the other puts me in mind of Carnaby Street. A few tables are empty, and at the other end of the carriage a businessman sits surrounded by papers and charts, his teacup pushed to the side, one hand holding a piece of paper up to his piggy little eyes, the other pushing half a buttered muffin into his fat-lipped mouth. A train attendant is delivering the military man's tea service, and a stout grey-haired woman with a pleasant face edges past him as she comes in. She walks up to our table, but seeing that it's full, she slides into the seat of the empty table across the way. Valerie smiles at her and starts to make an introduction, and Fergal courteously moves over to her table so that she doesn't have to sit alone. I'm pleased he did that. Maybe he isn't quite as full of himself as he seems. Her eye caught by Fergal's movement, Liana begins to turn towards the newly seated lady, ready to acknowledge the introduction which any moment now Valerie will effect. Just as a nondescript little man enters the carriage and the military man at the table by the entrance goes ballistic. Seizing his cane with a wordless roar, he brandishes it like a weapon, despite very obviously needing it to steady a gimpy leg, overbalancing his hot water jug as his other hand grabs at his tabletop to haul himself onto his feet. His dishes all go flying. He has managed to jump up, only his fury lending him the ability to stand without falling, and attempts to bring his cane down hard on the little man's head. The little man dodges away from the blow, but he can't get past the roaring lunatic, who is shouting at him with tremendous passion, thrashing about him with his cane in the most astonishing surge of violent energy, even though he can hardly stay upright and looks as if he'll fall any second. "You damned scoundrel! You double-dyed liar! You little sneak! You embezzling skunk! I'll skin you alive! I'll break this cane over your lying skull, see if I don't." And with another startling lunge he actually manages to connect his cane with the little man's shoulder, quite a vicious blow. The little man screams. Liana screams. The attacker is still roaring. And over it all, in sweet, measured tones as penetrating as any sergeant major's on the parade ground, "Charlie, what have you done now?" blares out the Glasgow accented voice of the grey-haired woman. I see it all in a flash. I'm not going to get any cream cakes, and bringing Liana to Paris has been a mistake, but I'm giving myself too much credit. I don't yet know the full dimensions of this fiasco, because it happens that I'm sitting by the window, and Liana's seat gives onto the central passageway. As she rises, shaking, there is nothing to prevent her from moving anywhere she likes, and I don't even want to think about what Liana might like to do to Charlie Stout. Fergal looks from my agonized expression to Liana's contorted face, and proves himself a man of action. He moves smoothly into the passage just behind Liana and catches at her arms. "Wheesht," he murmurs, "sure, I think they'll get on better without a lady in the mix." Liana's last vestige of control slips. The hated enemy is in front of her, and she is going to get him where it hurts, even if that means hurting someone else first. Forgetting for a moment that she is a lady, Liana elbows Fergal viciously, I really can't bring myself to say where, and screams, "Let me at him." Fergal, to his credit, somehow manages to absorb the blow and stay on his feet, and he hasn't let go of Liana. In fact, he tightens his grip. Liana is beside herself, screaming at poor Fergal. "Let me at him. I'll strangle him. I'll cut his lying tongue out and stuff it down his throat. I'll kill him. I'll break every bone in his rotten body. I'll throttle him." Obviously she can't cut his tongue out, there are no sharp enough knives in the carriage, but I wouldn't wager a groat on the chances of her not doing the rest. Not while Fergal has a good hold of her though, and he's certainly not loosening his grip. The lunatic by the entranceway has Stout trapped, he can't get out and he can't get past. And even although Stout is leaping about nimbly, and the military relic can hardly stand, every now and then a vicious blow from the cane connects. The military gentleman is still roaring insults and threats. Stout screams every time the cane hits him. Liana never stops screaming about how she's going to strangle Stout and or break him to bits. Her precise intention isn't fully clear, though not from want of poor Liana trying to make her wishes known. Fergal is still murmuring soothingly to her. He might as well save his breath. The noise level is indescribable. It's almost as bad as when 3C first pour out into the playground after double period maths. Recognizing that cream cakes are out of the question, I pour myself a cup of tea. It's just as undrinkable as Thomas Cook had warned us it would be. Eventually everything calms down. Stout manages to escape from the dining carriage. The military gentleman collapses back into his seat. He is taking a reviving nip from a flask. When his collapse left the entranceway available, Mrs. Stout calmly followed her husband, appearing quite incurious as to why a decrepit elderly Englishman and a perfectly normal-looking Scotswoman are both after his blood. I expect that she's used to it, the taxman is never a popular figure. Liana has sunk back into her seat, put her head down on the tea table, and is quietly weeping. Fergal is trying to soothe her. I have misjudged the man. Clearly when the chips are down he has community spirit enough. It's a miracle that the train attendants didn't stop the train and send for the police, but I expect that the French, who are very excitable, have a more tolerant attitude towards this kind of argy-bargy than most other nations. Being Scots-Irish, I take it in my stride. You see worse in Buchanan Street every Saturday night when the pubs come out. Glasgow is a warm, friendly city, with fine architecture and a great music scene, but it's no place for them as faint at the sight of blood. And as for the Irish who live in Glasgow, our men are poets and dreamers, we women have to be very practical, but anybody who thinks that a poet can't fight with the best of 'em is just begging for a bloody nose. The train attendants won't come into the carriage. I expect that they're off having a good gossip somewhere, but I suppose they might be afraid that another fight will break out. So, I'm a wee bit annoyed that I can't get my tea, but not bothered otherwise. Fergal, of course, being Irish, thinks nothing at all of Leanna's outburst. To my surprise, Valerie's eyes are twinkling. She seems to have enjoyed the uproar. Aileen is politely pretending that it didn't happen, and her friend Senga takes her cue from Aileen. Our train pulls into the Gare du Nord at the scheduled arrival time of 8:16 p.m. Dusk is just closing in. The Eiffel Tower is all lit up and it looks stunning. By now over her fury at Stout, Leanna is entranced and loudly admires the tower. This doesn't surprise me at all, for Leanna is a creature of moods. Valerie tells us that our package tour is booked into the Hôtel Albert in the Rue du Faubourg Saint-Denis, too close to the station for it to be worthwhile queuing up for taxis. But it turns out that getting from the station to our pension is a pretty tiring walk when you're struggling through the unknown and crowded streets of Paris with your luggage. Everyone who's on the tour straggles through the doors of the Hôtel Albert in a tired clump. It's hard to maneuver our luggage into the small revolving door partitions. We have to go in one person at a time and push hard on the glass part. Then we queue up to check in, which seems to take an inordinately long time. But this looks like a nice place, even if the service at reception is awfully slow. Fergal is long gone off to his home, lucky him. Major Peveril, after a few reviving nips, the relict had stumped over to introduce himself and to apologize, in a very gentlemanly way, for making a row, is staying at a different hotel. I hope it's as nice as this one. Ellis Peveril has gone straight from Gare du Nord to the British Embassy and is just in time to join the end of the receiving line. He congratulates himself silently on efficient use of time, only one day spent travelling, and that begun with a briefing at Whitehall and ending at a reception in Paris where most of his old chums from the war days are gathered. A top-hole way to enlist support for his Joint Task Forces op. He'd lucked in at Le Havre too, been on the train when that bad hat Harry Brown joined it. Clear as daylight, Brown must have been there to keep his eye on a new stooge. Perhaps that too good-looking Irishman. Or the little tour guide. Whatever Brown is plotting, the Sûreté will want to put a stop to it, and now ATJF can serve Brown up to them on a silver platter. A good omen for British-French accord. And then that slimy embezzling blackmailer what's-his-name had turned up. The Major has never had more fun improvising an excuse to introduce himself to an asset. One of those four women was Brown's target, that's obvious. Not clear which one yet, but they're all staying at the same hotel, so it's easy enough to track them. He soon spots one of his closest associates in the resistance days. It is astonishing how little the man has changed. A little thinner, a little greyer, a little more exhausted. We were all tired enough during the guerrilla days, thinks Peveril, but the poor old boy looks as if he hasn't slept for a year. Ah, mon vieux. Peveril is accosted seconds later. What a pleasure it is to see you again. But you look as though you have not slept for a year. Are they working you so hard at ATJF? Pretty hard, old boy. And the responsibility of top command gets to you. You'd know all about that, of course. You've been heading up Direction Générale de la Sécurité Extérieure for quite a while now, haven't you? His comrade nods. A little tidbit for you. Bad hat from a decade ago is on your turf. He'll bear close watching. Ah, murmurs the Frenchman, never one to waste words. Happened to spot him on the train down from Le Havre. Peveril continues. Had a bit of luck, old man. Another villain was on the train. I collared him years ago, but he got off. He grins. Had some fun with that. Thrashed the blighter. Then scraped an introduction to Brown's target by apologizing for making a scene. Could have been any one of 4 women, so I had to do something pretty spectacular to get noticed. Both men laugh. It's the kind of joke old soldiers relish. After we've been in the queue about 10 minutes, Liana says she's going to powder her nose. She looks like a wraith. Although I'm tired too, I can see that she needs a seat pretty badly. So I say okay. I can check us in. Why not take a seat in the lobby after you've been to the ladies and wait for me? No need for the both of us to stay on our feet. She flashes me a grateful smile, and although she's tired to death, I can see that my own dear Liana is back. She's herself again, the craziness on the train just a memory. Charlie Stout is playing least in sight, very wise of him. Aileen and her friend, who were first in the queue, have completed check-in and gone up to their room. Valerie has disappeared, and to my surprise and embarrassment I find Mrs. Stout standing behind me in the queue. The least I can do is apologize, and so we get into conversation. Mrs. Stout tells me that her Charlie had been so little affected by the beating he took in the train that he's off playing the tourist. He just couldn't wait to go up to the top of the Eiffel Tower. Mrs. Stout says in her placid way, "I told him it would still be there tomorrow, but he only laughed and went off, leaving me behind to check us in and see to the luggage. Ah, well. They're all little boys at heart, aren't they?" I'm relieved that Mrs. Stout is inclined to be friendly, and far too tired to care whether her husband is at the Eiffel Tower or drinking in some nightclub, which seems to be a more likely destination for a man like him. At last I arrive at the head of the slow-moving queue, and the hotel people want to see my passport, so I take it out of my bag to show them, and to my surprise they don't give it back. Regulations, madam, the passport go in the hotel safe. The gendarmes, they come to inspect the passports, and we keep the cart safe for you. Oh well, when in Rome. Continuing with the check-in, the hotel staff find that Liana is sharing the room, and then they refuse to give me our keys until her passport is handed over too. I look around the lobby, but I can't see her. I have had enough of this. It's nearly 9:30 by now, I'm tired, I didn't have my tea, and if I don't get checked in soon I won't get any dinner either, because I am not going out to explore a strange city without a meal inside me, and the hotel's dining room stops taking dinner orders at 9:45 p.m. sharp. I stiffen, and give the tiresome clerk the look I give girls whom I catch talking in class. Miss Stewart will give you her passport when she comes to collect her room key. Meanwhile you will have our luggage put in our room, and you will give me my room key now. I'm going to get something to eat. When you see Miss Stewart, please tell her I'm ordering dinner for us both. I hold out my hand. Looking a bit unhappy, the clerk turns to get my room key from the keyboard behind him and puts a huge brass key fob on my palm. Room 101, madam. So I go into the dining room and ask for the menu, which they call a cart. The waiter pours water for me while he waits for me to choose our food, and I begin to feel a little less cross. 2 steaks with pommes frites, s'il vous plaît. Crème glacée. No wine. As I'm handing back the cart, Mrs. Stout comes up to my table. The hands of the dining room clock are standing at 9:43. She hastily lays her hand on the waiter's arm. "I'll have whatever this lady is having." With that she turns back to me, smiling. "Well, I got here just in time. Another minute and I'd have gone dinnerless, eh?" She lays her hand on the back of the chair across from me. "Since we're both alone, shall we eat together?" Politely, she is waiting for me to say yes, before pulling the chair out. "Well, actually, I'm waiting for my friend Liana. I expect she'll be here any minute." Mrs. Stout takes her hand off the chair. "But of course, we'd be happy for you to join us, that is, if you don't mind that, well, that my friend doesn't like your husband." Mrs. Stout laughs and seats herself. She's in good company. We chat of this and that, and Mrs. Stout tells me to call her Yvonne. Another 10 minutes has gone by and there's still no sign of Liana. I wonder if she's stuck in a futile argument with the hotel clerk about handing over her passport. I give Yvonne an apologetic smile. I can't think what's keeping Liana. Maybe I'd better go and look for her. A tiny frown creases the space between Yvonne's eyebrows. Yes, it has been quite a while since she went off to powder her nose, perhaps we should go look. I'm startled, but then I remember, she'd been behind us in the queue. Of course she heard me talking to Liana. She rises. What can I do? We go off together to find Liana, pausing only to tell the maitre d' at the restaurant entrance that we'll soon be back. But we aren't back soon. Liana isn't arguing with the clerk at the reception desk. She isn't sitting in the lobby. She isn't in the powder room. We ask the reception clerk and the bellboy and the powder room attendant if they've seen her, but they haven't. I go up to our room, to see if she's there, noticing as I let myself in that my brass key fob is engraved 101. Liana isn't in our room. Feeling foolish, I check the ladies' room on this floor. But Liana isn't there either. Where can she be? I am beginning to get just a little worried. Yvonne has checked the lobby again whilst I was in the room, and popped out to see whether Liana had felt the need of a breath of air. But there's absolutely no sign of her. Reluctantly, I decide that we'd better ask for the hotel manager's help, and so I ask the clerk at reception to fetch him. The clerk explains that they're short-staffed, the manager is filling in for the bartender. We turn to the bar, and as we go in I hear Liana's distinctive laugh. Once again she has temporarily forgotten that she is a lady, and is sitting at the bar letting some Frenchmen buy her drinks. I lose no time in reclaiming her, withering the hopeful Frenchman with a killing look, and the three of us go in to eat. I do my best to ignore the hurt looks that the waiter casts me as he serves the meal which has been kept warm for us too long and is by now overcooked. It's clear that it wounds his pride to serve a meal which is less than perfect. Yvonne doesn't seem to mind that her meal has been spoilt by Liana's ill-timed sociability. That's one very calm lady, nothing appears to ruffle her placidity. The ice cream isn't as good as Dino's. It's not proper Tolly ice cream at all. Ha! So much for the wonderful French cooking.